Camping is, well, therapeutic to me. It helps me get away from the everyday grind. My life is usually a pretty busy life. Work consumes most of my day. Towering amounts of student debt doesn't help either. I usually don't have any money to do anything exciting with on a weekend. Well, except to go camping. This weekend is a holiday weekend, so I am getting an extra day off. I have decided to go camping the entire weekend. When I go camping, I go to a state forest that is pretty local. They don't charge any fees if you go into the wilderness. They do have a campground, but it is usually pretty booked, and to me, it isn't actually like going camping. When you hike into a forest where no one is, that is relaxing, just me and nature. I woke up that Friday morning and got everything packed. My hiking bag, hammock, still and flint, everything that is needed to be self-sufficient. I set out and drove an hour to the forest. I parked in the parking area and got my bag out. I locked my truck and proceeded to hike down the trail. All the birds were singing their songs. The temperature was pleasant. It was a very nice day to be on a hike. After an hour of walking, I found the camping spot on the trail. I quickly set off to set up camp. I hung my hammock between two trees, collected firewood for the fire. I walked to a nearby stream and collected some water to boil. I quickly got the fire going and set a pot on a rock to begin boiling the water. I managed to catch 2 fish from the stream with a simple fishing setup I carry in my hiking bag. Simply a spool of fishing line and a hook that is conveniently ready anytime I need it. I rinse a smooth, flat rock off and set it in the fire pit to warm up. I clean the fish and set them on a rock I set in the fire pit. After cooking the fish and letting the water cool from boiling, I ate my dinner. After cleaning up, I decided to lay back in my hammock and enjoy nature for a while. The sun was setting, giving the sky a beautiful pink and orange sunset. It was getting dark very quickly. The fire popped and crackled as the wood burned. The evening could not be any more perfect. The sun had finally set when all of a sudden I started hearing a faint laughing. The laughing was unnerving as I was the only one in this area. There are no other camping spots on the trail for another mile or two. I sat up in my hammock to see who was laughing. Standing at the edge of the tree line was something that nightmares are made of. A clown, monochrome, yet with exaggerated features. The hair was black and his white painted face had an eerie gray smile. As he stood there laughing, I could see something flashing in his hand as the light from the fire glinted off the metal. I was frozen in fear. He slowly started to step out from behind the trees. I couldn't stay here. I didn't want to stay here. My relaxing camping trip was starting to become a hell. I jumped out of my hammock, nearly falling into the fire pit. I quickly took off, running back down the trail as I could hear him start to give chase.
Oh, come on, I only want to play.
I quickly darted off the trail in hopes of losing him in the dense woods. As I ran, my foot got caught on a root. The next thing I realized was when everything was much darker now. I can still hear him laughing and calling out to me.
Where are you? Oh, come on. Come back. I only want to play. Come on.
I could barely see him moving a few 100 feet away as he was still looking for me. I quietly got up and started slowly making my way back toward the path. Once I was for sure that he could not see me, I took off running back down the path. I finally made it to my truck. I jumped in and started the engine. The only thing I had yet to realize was that he had slashed all of my tires. But I didn't care. I had to get out of there. As I started to make my way down the access road, I started going down this little hill. I slowly pushed on my brakes. Nothing. He had cut the brake lines. I slid out from driving on flat tires and hit a tree. Being in a hurry to leave, I didn't put on my seatbelt. The force of the impact caused me to hit my head against the steering wheel. As I woke up, he was right outside the truck, looking in at me, giving a sinister grin. "Get the fuck away from me," I yelled. His sinister grin turned into sad puppy dog eyes as he continued to stare at me.
"Why'd you run off? I only wanted to play."
He slowly raised the knife and started dragging it back and forth against the windshield. I was frozen in fear. I was trapped. I tried to start the truck again, but it wouldn't start, and the windows didn't bust when I hit the tree. Thankfully, he hadn't tried to break in yet. He made his way from looking into the windshield to the driver's window. I was maybe a mile from the main road. I decided that the only thing I could do is try to hit him with the door and run as fast as I could to the main road and hope for traffic. I quickly grabbed the door handle, pulled, and quickly swung the door open, hitting him in the process, knocking him down. I jumped out of my truck and began to run down the access road. He quickly jumped back up and started to chase me again. As I made it to the main road, I slipped in the gravel, falling onto the roadway. Just by luck, someone was driving by. The driver got out and asked if I was okay. The only thing I could do was look back down the trail, watching for that clown. Someone's after me, dressed in a clown outfit. He quickly helped me up and got me into his car and sped off. We made it to a ranger station about a mile or so down the road. After telling the ranger what had happened, they went into the woods trying to find the clown. The only thing they found was the costume and a very large kitchen knife laying in the back of my truck. I will no longer be going camping alone. And also make sure you never go camping alone as well. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you click the bell to receive notification on any new video I upload. Thank you and good night. I'm currently held up at a motel at the moment. It's been several weeks since that freak stalked me in the woods during my camping trip. I'm about at the end of my ropes. I've been on the run for the past couple of days. It started a few nights ago. I woke up during the night, reached for my cell phone to check the time, and it wasn't on my nightstand. In its place was a red foam clown nose. This psycho must have found something with my address on it in my truck that night. I was terrified. I quickly got up and ran for the door to the breezeway. It had been nailed shut. I ran back to my room and locked the door. I grabbed the dirty clothes I had laid on the floor, which still had my wallet and keys in it, and began to try to get them on when I started hearing a slow banging at my door. Even though I was on the second story of my apartment, I decided to jump out my window and make a run for it. I quickly jumped into my truck and fired it up. I threw it into reverse and backed out of my parking spot. I quickly hit the brakes before getting onto the road to make sure they haven't been tampered with. I drove to the police station and ran inside and told them everything that was going on. I followed them back to the apartment. They went inside to clear it. When they came back outside, one of them was holding up a cell phone and asked me if it was mine. I looked at it and said, "Yes, where did you find it?" The officer said he found it in the bedroom on the nightstand, but he didn't see any other signs of an intruder. I asked about the red foam nose. I know it was on the nightstand. I felt it. But he told me there was nothing there on my nightstand except my phone. What about the nails in my door? He said he checked there but didn't see any damage. I went back into my apartment. I didn't feel safe at all. I did notice a slight smell of paint when I walked back into my apartment though. I know that I have to leave here. Get away from this crazed maniac. I quickly packed a bag full of clothes. I left and called my mom, explaining what had just happened, and asked her if I could stay a couple of days until this mess was over. She reluctantly agreed. I quickly ran back out to my truck and left. As I drove, I made sure to take a different way, and also to take different turns to make sure no one was following me.
My mom greeted me at the door as I walked up. I told her it had been a long night and that I was still tired. So I walked up to my old room and laid down on my old bed. It had a relaxing and inviting feel to it. Before I knew it, I had fallen back asleep. I was suddenly awoken by my mom screaming. I quickly jumped up and raced down the stairs to see what was going on. As soon as I ran into the kitchen, I saw some writing on the wall. "You shouldn't have called the police" was painted on the wall in red paint. I quickly ran and grabbed a knife from the knife block on the counter. I ran over to the door and tried to open it. It was nailed shut. I ran back to the front door and the same thing, nailed shut. I quickly asked her where Dan, her boyfriend, was at. They had recently started dating and I haven't got to meet him yet. She said he had left to go to work last night before I had gotten there. I picked up her house phone and it was dead. Unfortunately, cell phones don't work out here, so we couldn't call out. In a panic, I started going from room to room, checking any place anyone could hide. As I was checking the upstairs closet, I heard my mom shriek very loud, and as I ran down the stairs, I started hearing that damn giggle. As I rounded the corner into the living room, it was him holding my mom's mouth with a knife at her throat.
"You shouldn't have called the police. All I wanted to do was play."
"You let her go. She has nothing to do with this. This is between you and me."
"But where's the fun in that?"
I never felt so afraid and angry. I could see fear in her eyes as she started crying. I wanted this to be over. I looked over them and saw someone walking up onto the front porch. It was Dan. He quickly forced the door open and tackled both of them. The knife slid from the clown's hand toward me. I quickly picked it up. The clown jumped up from the floor and ran out the door. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean for him to follow me here. He was a person who attacked me when I was camping and last night. How did he find me? I'm wondering if he found a way to track my cell phone or something, so I decided to get rid of it. They made plans to go stay at his place. I decided to get out of town to see if he would follow me. I drove an hour away and got a cheap motel. Along the way, I stopped on the side of the interstate and tossed my cell phone into the river. At this point, I don't know what to do or where to go from this maniac who is trying to follow me. Currently, I hope I've gotten rid of him for now. I've been in this motel room for a week. Eating takeout has made me long for a good home-cooked meal. Across the street there was a restaurant called the Dinner Table Buffet. I haven't heard anything out of this psycho, so I decided to walk across and get something to eat. I walked in and the waitress greeted me and said that I could sit anywhere I would like. I found me a comfortable booth and sat down. Another waitress came over and asked me what I would like to drink. "Tea," I said politely. Then she told me that I could get up and help myself to the buffet. I walked over to see that they had some nice choices between steak, fried chicken, chicken and dumplings, and fish. I fixed my plate and walked back to the table and sat down. After eating pizza, this was hearty and filling. I got up and walked to the dessert counter and found that they had an assortment of pies, cakes, and cobblers. I got me a piece of pecan pie, a scoop of ice cream, and some blackberry cobbler. As I made my way back to my booth, I saw the waitress walking away from my table after refilling my tea. After eating, I got up, walked to the front, and paid the cashier and thanked them for the nice meal. As I walked across the street, my head started to spin. I tried to hurry up and get to my motel room before I passed out. The next thing I realized was flashing. As I looked up and out a back window, I saw streetlights flashing their eerie light in. I tried to sit up, but passed back out instead. When I came back, I was cold and wet. As I opened my eyes, I heard,
"There you are!"
My eyes widened as I tried to move, yet I found myself bound.
"Now that you can't run away, we can play!"
I realized I was back at my mom's house. He picked up a large kitchen knife off the table and started walking toward me. How did you find me and what do you want from me? I exclaimed.
To play, of course. And you should check your truck bed more carefully.
Realizing the rush to get away, I didn't check back there. He must have put something back there to track me. He took his knife and started tracing around on my chest and stomach.
Do you remember the game Operation? I'd bet it would be real fun to play with you.
He started slicing down my chest as I passed out. The last thing I heard was a loud bang when I passed out. I woke up later that night in the hospital with my mom by my side. My mom's next door neighbor saw someone in a clown outfit moving around in the woods last week, yet didn't think nothing of it until she saw the police pass by, then turn into my mom's driveway. Then yesterday, she saw someone driving my truck that resembled the clown, so she called the police. I owe her my life. The clown is now dead after being shot by the police. I had to have 20 stitches to close my wound down my chest. My life will forever be changed by the events that happened to me.
Join the coven. I'm an immortal, and I'm scared for my life. A story written by Stragonian. Hi everyone, my name's Jake, and I'm an immortal. I suspect that you might be too. Not you in particular, dear reader. I'm not a psychic. And I've got no idea who is going to read this. I mean you, in its most general sense. It's quite possible that all of humanity is immortal, but I have no way of testing that, strange as it may sound. It's possible I'm the only one, or I might just be the only one who's aware of my own immortality. If that's the case, and you are immortal, you have my deepest sympathies. I'll start from the beginning, shall I? I'm told it's a very good place to start, after all. I haven't always known I was immortal. I only found out in my early adulthood. But I forgot for almost a decade. I first figured it out, though, on my way to the university one day. I was running late for a particularly grueling economics class, and I was in a hurry. To make a long story short, I didn't look both ways before crossing the street, and I was nailed by a big black SUV. The pain didn't set in at first. I didn't even know what happened. One minute I was running across the street, and the next I was face down on the asphalt. I thought for a brief moment that I must have tripped. When I tried to get up, though my legs wouldn't support me. Then, when I tried to mutter a bewildered "what?", blood began pouring out of my mouth, and I found I couldn't even breathe in. Then, the pain came along. Slowly at first, a dull throbbing in my legs and chest, then rapidly growing in intensity and spreading to every inch of my body. A few seconds passed. That felt like hours before I was face down on the road again, trying to scream, but unable to do so. Then, unable to breathe, my head began to swim, and a few moments later, I lost consciousness. I woke up in a tunnel, as cliched as that may sound. The most impossible tunnel. I could walk again, feeling no pain. And I found that I wasn't starved for oxygen anymore. In fact, it felt like I didn't need to breathe at all. Though I quickly decided it wasn't wise to test this hypothesis. That wasn't what made the tunnel impossible, though. The laws of reality simply didn't apply there. Not the laws I was familiar with, anyway. Gravity, for example, was always perfectly aligned with the ground, and even when I climbed up what appeared to be a hill from a distance, the floor felt perfectly level once I reached it. I think I only went a few hundred feet that time. The tunnel was poorly illuminated, the only lights being brief, randomly appearing flashes of green and white that flickered in and out within a fraction of a second. Eventually, I had to use my phone for light. Somehow, wherever I was, I still had it. At the end of the tunnel was, you guessed it, a light. When I entered it, I awoke in a hospital bed with some of my friends from university at my side. I had a vague recollection of what had just happened, but it was like trying to remember a dream, one that faded more quickly with each passing moment. As it turns out, I had been unconscious for over a day and suffered extensive injuries. The doctors told me that they had expected a full recovery, albeit a very slow one. So, that was the first time I died. By the time I left the hospital, I had completely forgotten. I'll spare you the details of my next couple of deaths. There's nothing particularly fascinating in them that you haven't already heard. And I forgot my experiences just as quickly. To summarize, I drowned in a boating accident, got a blood infection from an unrelated cut I got while camping, and I even got electrocuted by an uninsulated live wire at a construction site. By the way, that's a nasty way to go. Quick, but thoroughly unpleasant, and each time I woke up in a hospital bed with no recollection of my time in the impossible tunnel. My fifth death, though, was different. A mugging gone wrong left the police pressing me for details day after day. Each time I tried to remember what happened, a little bit more of the puzzle fell into place. First, the gun pointed at my chest. Then it was him firing the gun at me. Then the people running and screaming, trying to figure out where the gunshot came from. Finally, the tunnel. And with that single memory, a flood of unrelated memories came rushing back. Every time I had died in the past and had been sent back to the tunnel, it was all there, etched in my brain, as though with the chisel. It was then that I knew, truly knew, that I was immortal. So I did what any other newfound immortal would. I had fun. I wasn't an idiot, of course. I knew that, immortality or no, I wasn't indestructible. My injuries would last. So, presumably, if I became paralyzed, that wouldn't be fixed in my next life. Similarly, I'd be stuck with HIV or cancer if I ever caught them. So, in many ways, I became more cautious. Risking a few years of your inevitably ending life is one thing, but risking eternity as a quadriplegic? That's something else entirely. I did a lot of traditionally risky things that many other people are scared of, though. Swimming with sharks and deep-sea diving, for example. Skydiving, of course. And a whole host of related activities. And when I died, I simply used it as an opportunity to explore the impossible tunnel further. The first thing that became obvious was that the tunnel was becoming longer. Every time I died, whether it had been a day or a year since my last death, the tunnel took a couple minutes longer than the last time to go through. It occurred to me that this may become tedious in the future. If I had to spend hours or days crawling through a tunnel to get back to my life. Still, if there's one thing immortals have lots of, it's time. right? The next thing I noticed was how wrong all the geometry was. There were times I was sure, I was absolutely certain that the tunnel went back and crossed over itself, but there was no trace of where I'd come through before. One particularly egregious time, I walked in a tight circle for almost 5 minutes straight, as though on a spiral staircase that someone had flattened. I made dozens of circles without finding an exit, or even the entrance, when it suddenly appeared in front of me, clear as day. Finally, the way I interacted with the world seemed to be based solely on how I believed I should interact with it. One time, I realized that I wasn't in my real body, and thus shouldn't have my phone. It simply vanished from my hand. It took me a few deaths to work out what was happening, and even longer to condition my brain into believing whatever I wanted it to believe. But in the end, I could do pretty much anything I wanted. The experience was similar to lucid dreaming. Things worked out, more or less, however I felt they should, which made it very easy for things to stay the same, but rather more difficult to change on a whim. After that, rather than walk down the tunnel, I allowed myself to be gently carried on a slow, invisible river that flowed along the tunnel, or so I imagined. If I was in a hurry to speed things along, I would instead fly along at breakneck speed, arriving in scarcely any time at all. Of course, I also wanted to find out why I kept coming back to life through the tunnel. I've never been one to look a gift horse in the mouth. But there are some things you can't leave well enough alone. It took me no more than a week to find out what I now believe to be the answer. Quantum immortality, they call it. Now, some of you may likely have heard of this theory, and anyone who's honestly familiar with quantum mechanics is likely rolling their eyes. I get it. Believe me, the amount of faux intellectual quasi-philosophical bull that has been passed off as being quantum something or other is simply astounding. But just bear with me, because whether it's aptly named or not, it seems to be what I'm going through. At its most fundamental level, quantum immortality is an offshoot of the many worlds theory. For anyone who hasn't seen a sci-fi movie in their entire life, the many worlds theory is that anytime something happens randomly, all outcomes happen and reality splits into a number of versions where each possibility plays out. In one reality, you might go straight to work. In another, you play hooky. In a third, you try to go to work but get into a car accident and go to the hospital. You get the idea. Now, of course, there isn't any evidence that this actually takes place. It's mostly the realm of science fiction. Parallel dimensions is often what they're called. Quantum immortality takes this one step further. You see, it holds that a person's consciousness can't be destroyed. Anytime you die, the person who dies is simply an empty shell, and your consciousness moves on to another reality where you survived. You never experience your own death, but everyone around you can die at any time. They'll just pop into another reality where you can't follow them. The only difference is that, rather than a new reality being created each time I die, I seem to head into a pre-existing reality, which frankly is a little bit troubling. First, because it suggests that these realities were already established, and as such are already different from my own. Indeed, I've noticed an increasing number of anomalies as I've died more and more often. My house changes subtly. Friends who got laser eye surgery are wearing glasses again. That sort of thing. Second, though, and I find a bit more disturbing, is the question of what happens to the version of me that already existed here. Do we merge, or does something else happen? It's a question for a philosopher, I suppose. And it doesn't seem to matter. After all, there has been a far more disturbing development in the last few deaths I've had. And this, more than anything else, is why I've bothered to write all this down. It all began 4 months ago. And yes, I had gotten up to a death every month or so. Maybe it's a bit risky, but you can only die so many times before you stop getting worried. Anyway, I was traveling down the tunnel, floating on my back as usual. Recently, I had discovered the trick of playing music to listen to on my trip, so I was enjoying some smooth jazz on my imaginary, lazy river cruise. Suddenly, though, I heard a scraping behind me. Now this alone was enough to freak me out. Of all the times I'd been through there, dozens, if not hundreds, I had never encountered anything that moved or made a sound. No rocks falling, no water dripping, and certainly nothing alive or between lives in there with me. When I opened my eyes, though, I saw something even more disturbing. I wasn't going anywhere. I could feel myself being carried away on my imaginary current. But I wasn't moving even an inch down the tunnel. It was like being in a dream where you're running but still stuck in place. The scraping was getting louder now, and it sounded for all the world like claws dragging against the stone floor. When I realized the river wasn't carrying me anywhere, I stopped believing in it, and I hit the floor with a sharp jolt. I knew I had to get out of there. Somehow, I knew that if I could make it to the light and back into my body, I'd be safe. So I pulled myself along, dragging myself on hands and knees down the tunnel. Again, I could feel myself moving foot by foot, but the tunnel walls only showed inches passing by. I don't know how long I scrambled along like that, clawing my way to safety through an impossible tunnel. But I made it, back in the familiar hospital bed. The doctor's telling me again how lucky I am to be alive. For the first time, they were right. Every time since then, it's gotten worse. I've learned to fight whatever it is through intense focus, managing to increase my speed, despite its nightmarish influence. But every time I go through the tunnel, it gets longer. Eventually, whatever that thing is, it'll catch up to me. Fighting it is exhausting work. And before long, the tunnel will be too long for me to focus the entire time. I'll slip, and it's going to catch me, and I don't know what'll happen then. Last time, it began tilting the tunnel backwards, making the world that had always been level before tip into its maw, as though the thing were drinking me out of a glass. As it drew near, I lost all feeling in my legs, and I could feel a cold gust of air, almost like a breath, blow against me. I don't know how close it got to me. It wasn't far. Next time, maybe the time after, it'll catch me. It's just a matter of time. I'm an immortal, and I'm scared for my life.
Me and a few of my buddies were camping on a 3-day weekend. It started out pretty good, beers, s'mores, repeat. By the last day, it wasn't so sweet. A few guys with rifles approached us asking if we'd seen any deer, and since it wasn't hunting season, we knew they weren't there for deer. We said yes, pointing deeper into the woods. The guys shrugged and said, "Enjoy your camp out while you can." We waited for them to leave before packing our shit to get the hell out of there. We had it all packed and the sunset was coming fast. We hopped in our truck and sped out. That's when it hit me like a brick. There were the rednecks chasing us on RVs. They continued to shoot at us. We made a sharp turn. Thank God we lost them. I have no idea why or what they had in store for us. Let's just say I don't go camping there anymore. My dad was a journalist for most of his life and is now an author. This is one of his stories from hiking the Appalachian Trail. My dad hiked the trail mostly by himself, but occasionally would run into other hikers and spend a few days hiking and camping with them. He said it was always a pleasant experience and he made a lot of good friends. He met Goff and Molly, a really nice couple, and began hiking with them for a couple of days. After camping with them and becoming very good friends, they went their separate ways as my dad pulled out ahead of them. He was about 2 days further down the trail than them when he stopped at a town to get some real food and relax. That's when he found out that Geoff and Molly had been murdered in their sleep by a stranger on the trail. Molly had been raped and stabbed repeatedly throughout the process, and Geoff had been shot. I think that it's absolutely terrifying that my dad had just camped with them. There's an article on this murder that my dad wrote for our city's newspaper. I'm gonna leave a link in the description below. So me and a couple of my buddies went camping last summer alongside the Willamette River. We actually had a decent hike into the deep end of the woods. We did some night fishing, listened to music, and basically drank to the point where everything was funny later in the night. I would guess we finally called it a night somewhere past 2 a.m. I shared a tent with one of my buds while the other two shared another tent. We heard them laughing about something. At first, we laughed at the sound of their laughing, but it soon got annoying and we yelled for them to shut up. One of them responded, "It isn't us." I sat up startled with the response. I came to realize that it was the sound of only one person laughing, and it didn't sound like either one of my friends. Even in my drunk state, I realized how odd it was for somebody to be out this far in the woods so late at night. The laughing gradually got closer and louder to our campout. My friend shot up and looked at me with a worried look on his face. I heard my other friends scream over to us that they were getting freaked out. As the laughing got closer, I could make it out to be very clearly the laugh of a male in his 30s or 40s. He sounded he was as drunk as us, messing around with his friends. But we only heard his laugh, nobody else. There was something indescribably creepy about his laugh, too, as if it was missing something to it. You had to be there to understand what I mean. The laughing was now just at the edge of our campsite, but we couldn't hear any footsteps at all. Now that may not seem like a big deal, but it was impossible for anybody to move through there without making any noise. And finally, all of us suddenly heard the laughing stop completely. We had no idea where whoever that was standing, as he hadn't made a single stepping sound. We sat there in silence, looking at each other. My friend was clearly freaked out, but he was keeping it together the best he could. Finally, something broke the silence. The sound of something rubbing against the cottony fabric of the tent. We saw an outline of a hand through the moonlight pressing on the tent. We both screamed at the top of our lungs before going out of the tent. We ran as fast as we could through the woods, our other friends following us. After about 5 minutes, we somehow found our car. I actually puked from running so much before taking the wheel. I don't condone drinking or driving, but I still believe we were just in the situation. By far the most horrifying experience of my life. No idea who or what the hell that was, or what they wanted.
Join the coven. Don't go to the gas station. A story written by JoeDog93. My name is... well, let's not get bogged down by details. By the time you read this, I will be locked away. I've killed my cheating wife. Now I know what you're thinking. By the sound of my last statement, I must be some kind of deranged lunatic. Mommy got around, and Daddy was a raging drunk who staggered home every night to beat us senseless. A dysfunctional family is surely the breeding ground of psychopathy. Sorry to disappoint, but it couldn't be further from the truth. My folks weren't perfect, but I had a very happy childhood. My mother was a secretary, and my father worked himself to death in a cubicle for 30-something years. I went to bed at 9 p.m. every night, nice and full of Mom's delicious meal, nurturing my body to help me grow into the man I am today. I was never really afraid of the dark like the other kids. There were no monsters in my closet or under my bed. I guess that's because there was already a monster in my bed, fast asleep in his cowboy pajamas and clutching his teddy bear. I hope you're paying attention. You might learn something. The times make the man, not the other way around. By the time I was 17, I had already killed 7 men. I was drafted into the service that year and spent the next few years of my life jumping in and out of foxholes. I saw 2 of my best friends die right beside me. There was an artillery barrage. We were all laying down with our heads in the dirt. The next thing I knew, everything was on fire, and my friends were gone. Just 1 month shy of when we were supposed to get home. My father always used to tell me, "You'll see, son, a little bit of hard work and a lot of sacrifices pay off in the end." I sacrificed a lot for my country. Went partially deaf in 1 year, lost my spleen, shattered my pancreas. What did that get me? Night terrors, flashbacks, paranoia, and a job in my podunk little town at a gas station. Who would have thought shooting an insurgent half a mile away from me with a rifle during high wind wasn't an applicable work skill? Go figure. It wasn't all bad. At least I had my high school sweetheart. We married as soon as I got back home. Never got a chance to before. It was great. For about 6 months. It's hard to say where exactly it all went wrong. 1 minute we were happily married and couldn't get enough of each other. And the next, we were vying for the front door. Our marriage counselor suggested taking a vacation together to try and restore the fire in our relationship. But I found myself praying for the plane to just crash and end it all. Sad, isn't it? I would have rather just been killed than go home. The signs of an affair had been slowly starting to come together, but I chose to ignore them because I didn't want to believe she would ever cheat on me. One day, I came home early from work, and she went out to the store and left her cell phone at home by mistake. It was very unlikely for her to do that. Usually I would fight the urge to give in and snoop. I'm not sure how else to explain it, but to this day, I swear, it was like there was a voice inside of me telling me, pick up the phone. Her password was her birthday. How original. I scrolled through the phone and opened her messages. 15 new ones. What a very popular lady. And they were all from a number that I didn't know. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. Every emotion I had ever had spilled over at once. Anger, sadness, hopelessness, confusion, embarrassment, betrayal, and rejection. From what I could read, the two of them talked for hours on end about how much they loved each other and couldn't stand to be apart. They even ridiculed me for how naive I was for not catching on. It took every ounce of restraint I had not to smash the phone into pieces. What was I to do? She wasn't going to get away with this. I heard her keys rattling as she came in through the front door. I quickly placed the phone back where she had left it and slapped on the TV. I didn't want to let on what I knew. Not yet. "Hey, honey," she said as she came in toting a paper bag full of food for the week. "How was work?" "It was fine," I answered as I randomly surfed through channels. "Boring as usual." "Sometimes boring is a good thing, babe." Screw her, calling me babe like everything was fine and dandy. I began to wonder if she called the other guy babe or honey, or had any little pet names for him. She was skimming the pockets on her blue jeans, looking for her cell phone. "Oh, you left your phone on the table over there," I pointed out, eager to see her reaction. Her face hardened with apprehension as she hustled over to the table and picked up her phone. "Oh, so that's where I left it." She tried to fake a smile as her voice quavered with angst. "Your phone beeped a couple times. I think you have some messages. Everything okay?" "Yeah, it was nothing. Everything is great." What a lying witch. We talked a little bit during dinner, but I can't even begin to recall what about. Her food never tasted so disgusting. It was a meal built on deceit. My brain was telling me to bash her face in, then and there, and I wanted to. That wasn't an option for me, though. I needed to know who the other guy was. There was no way he was getting a free pass. The next day at work, I was exhausted and emotionally eviscerated. I barely got any sleep at night. I tried to get back into her phone, but the password was changed. The witch suspected something. At about 10:30 p.m., a customer I had never seen before came in. I distinctly remember the time because he had somewhat startled me. This time of night was slow, and I always nodded off for a bit until my shift ended. He walked around for a little bit, grabbing miscellaneous items. I remember being annoyed because he was talking on his phone and wouldn't shut the hell up. It took him about 5 minutes to get everything he wanted. A few packs of bubblegum, some snacks, bullcrap like that. He was so engrossed in his conversation, he probably thought he was all alone. He set his hand over his phone and turned his attention toward me. I get a lifestyle skin, please?" he whispered, batting his eyes with eagerness. This had to be the most uncomfortable thing ever. I hated when people would come up and ask me for condoms. What do you do on your own time is your own business. I don't want to hear about it. At least this guy wasn't some punk teenager, though, trying to show off by asking for an extra large size. While he was trying to retrieve his wallet, he put his phone on the counter and turned on the speaker. Hey, listen. I'm sorry, I'm late. I had to pick up some things." I couldn't have been more disinterested in watching this guy scream into his phone, until I heard the voice on the other end. "Well, hurry up. I've only got a couple hours, and I want to make the most of them." That voice, that was my wife on the phone. The conversation continued. "Are you sure tonight is good?" "It couldn't be any more perfect. I've been thinking about this all week." "Well then, prepare to have your mind blown." "It's not my mind that I want to be blown." The passion and sensuality burning from her voice were enough to set the phone ablaze. What the hell? I couldn't remember the last time we even made love, let alone even teased the idea of it. So this was him. This was my enemy. The man that made me lose sleep. Those goddamn pale blue eyes. The conceited way he smiled. His slicked back hair. My face went from grim white to beet red in an instant. They ended their phone call, and he slid some money towards me. "Sorry about that, guy. Big plans tonight, if you know what I mean." At that moment, something snapped inside me. I always thought that was just a figure of speech, saying that someone snapped. There really is something to it, though. All my time in the war, I knew I didn't come home the same as I was when I left. But my time in the service molded me into something else. I was a lean, mean, well-oiled machine. But now some screws had come loose, and it was time. Time to kick butt and chew bubblegum, and that cheating jerk just bought the last of the bubblegum. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, I had him over the counter. He squirmed and fidgeted like a helpless baby. This was quite a new feeling for me, so much different from shooting a person some distance away. In the army, I never really got a good look at the people I killed. You just squeezed the trigger, and down went the target. This was exhilarating. I have never felt so in control of another human being. This man was literally about to be erased from existence by my bare hands. As he faded into an eternal sleep, the monster inside of me was awakened. He came out to play, amidst the chaos. The gun we kept under the counter emerged from its hiding spot in a last attempt to get me off of him. The guy reached for it. I didn't initially plan on shooting him, but since the wonderful idea presented itself, I just couldn't resist. The gun went off twice. Where there was once the face of a man, now lay a disturbing brew of blood and brains. I sat there for a minute to catch my breath, stewing in the mishmash. The calmer I got, I began to double-think my actions. There was no turning back now. I locked up the gas station and tried to come up with my next move. Nobody saw him come in, and no one needed to see him on the security cameras either. I hurried to the back room. The surveillance setup was by no means state-of-the-art. It still recorded on old VHS tapes. The only negative thing about those? Sometimes the tape got eaten. I could make the footage for the whole day disappear, and it would come off as nothing more than a sad coincidence. With the video proof of what happened taken care of, there was only the matter of disposing the body and the car that he arrived in. Something clicked in my mind. The old logging road. In high school, a lot of the kids would go there to fool around. That would be the perfect spot to dump the evidence. Maybe just go a little bit further into the woods. I hid out in the gas station for a couple more hours until I was sure no one would be around. Finally, it was about an hour or so later when I decided that if I was going to move it, it had to be now. My wife would eventually be home from her extracurricular activity and start to wonder where I was. I packed up the body in the trunk of the car. He arrived in and headed out. I debated getting rid of the gun too, but I decided to leave it behind. It was right where it was, like always. Nothing out of place. Geez, this guy's car had seen better days. A 92 Taurus? This was the most uncomfortable ride I had ever taken. Stomach-churning anxiety excluded. At least a black box was out of the question. When I was sure I had gotten deep enough into the woods, I wiped the car down and tossed the keys as far away as I could. This guy's final resting place was the trunk, and that was the way it was going to stay. Now began the journey home. I didn't think this part through too well. I arrived home about 45 minutes later. My wife ambushed me with questions as soon as I made it through the door. It was like she wanted to start a fight. She sat there alone in the dark for God knows how long, waiting for me to come home. "Where the hell have you been?" she howled at me, clearly holding back tears. She missed someone all right, but despite the words coming out of her mouth, it wasn't me. I rubbed my eyes and headed to the kitchen for a beer. My car broke down, I assured her. "I'm sorry I'm late." "You could have called me, you know. I would have come and got you." The conversation went back and forth for a couple minutes. My cell phone died. Didn't even have to think about that one. Whatever question she could have come up with, I seemed to be able to talk my way out of it. It didn't even feel like me. It felt like someone was guiding my hand, pulling the strings and providing the script for me. I just delivered the lines and threw in an ad-lib or two, now and then. "And what about the gas station? Why couldn't you just use their phone?" She had to go there. Oh, enough already with the questions. A damn rat or raccoon or animal of some sort chewed up the phone line. I kept warning everyone when we first found those droppings, but no one listened to me. As I took a moment to catch my breath, she wiped some tears away from her face and continued, I don't know what your problem is lately. I'm concerned about where you were, and you bite my head off for it?" "Oh yeah?" Now, I had some questions of my own. This was going to get interesting. "Where exactly were you tonight?" I was nowhere. What are you going on about?" Her vulnerability slowly disappeared, and the walls I had become accustomed to were slowly going back up around her again. "Then where is dinner?" "Checkmate." I threw my hands into the air and motioned towards the obviously empty kitchen. "You mean that you were sitting here all night by your lonesome worrying about me and never ate anything?" Who did my wife think she was fooling? She was a habitual, nervous eater, and had been known to practically inhale a chicken from across the room. If she was so nervous about me, it would have knocked the edge off her appetite. I get tired of waiting and went ahead without you. Yours is in the fridge, she said. I walked over to the fridge and opened it. That's funny. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you didn't pick up anything. And you work at a grocery store. I shut the door and walked back over to her and got right in her face. If I were you, I wouldn't quit your day job, hun. You'd make a much better escort than a housewife. She slapped me square across the face. My neck felt like it was going to twist off. Back off! Make a goddamn sandwich or something for all I care. Little did she know that I realized what was really going on. She was upset her lover boy bailed on her. Throughout the next few nights, it took every ounce of restraint I had not to kill her in her sleep. It would have been so easy to smother her with a pillow, or take a kitchen knife and plunge it into her chest. But the more I thought about it, I liked this idea better. Why give her the easy way out? The one she truly loved was rotting away as if he never existed. I should send her to join him. Nah, she was gonna stay right here with me and wallow in her misery, whether she liked it or not. 2 weeks went by, and we hardly said a word to each other. I had relocated to the couch, by her choice, not mine. If sleeping next to her at night gave her that much displeasure, then I was going to enjoy every minute of it that I possibly could. I wanted to make her miserable for what she did to me. We began to fight over every little thing. A comment over just about anything could set either one of us off. That brings us till today. I was working the night shift. It was the dead hour as usual. So I was taking my much-deserved siesta. Not everyone was built to sleep on a couch, so my naps were becoming more frequent. Suddenly I was rattled awake. Hello there? Hey buddy, are you okay? I just wanted to check out really quick. I sprang back to life. I banged a few keys on the register as if I was never sleeping. Oh yeah, hey there, sorry about that. What can I do for... I couldn't believe who I was looking at. My heart could have come crashing through my chest. Looking at me dead in the eyes was my wife's lover. What the hell? I started to go into hysterics. Hey, hold on there, guy. He put his hand on my shoulder. Take it easy. I'm sorry I scared you. I just wanted to buy a couple of things. How could this be happening? I blew his face clean off and left him in the woods. Here he was before me, though, and without a scratch on him. I thought maybe it was a dream or hallucination. But then I never started to wake up. This was all too real. His phone began to ring. He put it on speaker, just like last time. Hello? Where the hell have you been? What's taking you so long? Much to my surprise, though I'm sure if you're reading this, you may have caught on by now. That was indeed my wife's voice on the other end of the phone again. Sorry, I'm going as fast as I can, he said. We don't have much time. I have to see you now. You're over at the Valley Motel, right? Yeah, that's where we were supposed to meet last time. All right, I'm just stopping for some gas and I'll be right. Listen to me. Don't go to the gas station. I want you to just come straight here. He seemed awfully confused. But... Just do it. I'm afraid to be anywhere alone. I think he knows something. All right, fine. He hung up his phone and quickly paid for his items. He almost bought all the same things he got that night. Almost. No condoms this time, man? Huh? He glanced at me. Sounds like you got a big night ahead of you with your lady friend, I explained. He didn't seem too pleased by that. Just mind your business, guy, and go back to sleep. I gotta go. My wife was my business. If putting him in the ground didn't stop this torrid love affair, I guess I was gonna have to put her in the ground after all. Now I knew where they were going to be. Time to catch him in the act. I borrowed the gun from under the counter one last time, knowing full well this was going to be the last time I needed it. I made it to the Valley Motel faster than the other guy did. I would have thought he would have known his way there better by now from his previous rendezvous with my wife. Sitting in my car, I loaded the gun and watched from afar as I surveyed what room he entered. I clutched the gun in my hand. The cold, hard steel matched my heart, that was now beating for one reason only: justice. I went over to the door and fired the gun. 2 shots rang out into the night. With the heel of my right boot, the door to the room came crashing down. The surprise alone should have given them both heart attacks. "What the hell?" the guy shouted when I entered the room. He and my wife were sitting on the bed. I got in there before they could get started. "What the hell are you doing here?" my wife shouted at me. "You're crazy, you know that?" Her lover took a good look at me. You're the guy from the..." My wife began to scream over him. "I told you to just come straight here. Now look what you did. He's found us." "Who is this lunatic anyway?" he asked. All this time together, and she didn't even talk about me or anything. I figured now was a good time as any to get acquainted. "Well, buddy,"